Hi everyone, and welcome back to my channel. Today we are going to be crocheting a very highly anticipated project. We are finally crocheting a striped sweater! This was a big project for me. This was the first time I invented a pattern for a piece of clothing, so trying to figure that out while crocheting the sweater was pretty difficult, honestly, but it was so well worth it, and I'm so excited with how it turned out. And with this pattern, you can make any size sweater, any kind of design in terms of stripes, or you can make it solid as well. So I hope you enjoy the pattern. Make sure to like and subscribe for more projects like this, and follow me on my new Instagram and TikTok. Links are in my bio, and if you do make any of my projects, please make sure to tag me. Without any further ado, let's get started. So as for some materials, grab whatever colors you like for this striped sweater. This pattern though was made for a size 4 yarn, which is like a medium weight. So since I have 4 colors, I initially started with 4 skeins. However, for 2 of the colors, I had to end up getting a second skein. So I ended up having to buy 6 skeins for this project, and I estimated that to be about 1,400 yards. But I used a 4mm crochet hook. Also, so we're going to need some fabric scissors, a yarn needle, and I thought some stitch markers were really useful along the way, or alternatively you could use pins. And lastly, you're going to want a measuring tape / reference sweater. I found that it was really useful to compare my proportions to a sweater that I already owned and I knew that fit me well. Alternatively, you could just measure yourself with a measuring tape. But that should be everything you need. So to help you kind of understand the process for this sweater, we are going to make this in kind of 4 different parts. So first we're going to make our front panel of the sweater, then we're going to make our back panel, then after attaching these 2 together we will make our sleeves, and lastly we'll make the trim for the neck, sleeves, and then the bottom of the sweater as well. So starting with the front panel, we're going to take our first color and our crochet hook, and we're going to make a slip knot. So you are going to chain for the width of your sweater. So for mine, I ended up chaining 70 across. And feel free to simply hold this chain up to your reference sweater, or if you're using measurements, just chain for however long you want your sweater to be wide. Now, I do have a disclaimer here for you. The initial amount that I chained to be as wide as the sweater ended up shrinking by about 3 inches once I started crocheting. So if you want to be safe, maybe add on a couple inches of extra chains so that your sweater doesn't end up too small. So once we have this chain, we are going to start in the second chain from the hook, and we're going to do a half double crochet. We're going to yarn over onto our hook and insert the hook into the second chain from our hook, right here. Then grabbing a yarn, pulling it through, we're going to yarn over once more and pull through all 3 loops. And this is a half double crochet. So once again, yarn over, go through the chain, pull a yarn through, yarn over once again, and pull through all 3 loops. So we are going to simply half double crochet along our chain and continue till you reach the end of the chain, but just repeating this same stitch over and over again. For me, it'll be about 70 stitches. It might be something similar for you, maybe less, maybe more. So just continue to the end and we'll meet you back there. So coming up to my last stitch here, once we get to the end of the row, and we should have something looking like this for our first row, we are going to chain 1 at the end, just like that, and flip our work over. And now we're going to be working in the opposite direction. So skipping that first chain and just starting in the very first stitch right here, we are going to, again, half double crochet into this stitch, just like so, and continue half double crocheting across for row 2. This row should be a little bit easier to half double crochet in, just because the chain row can be a little bit messy. But this is essentially what we're going to be doing over and over for a while. So next I'm going to demonstrate how to change colors if you're going to change colors for a stripe. So you're going to continue this, and I'll meet you back and show you how to change colors. And something I might recommend you do is kind of do a little test patch. I did this to figure out my pattern and the stripes that I wanted to do. So as you can see here, I was kind of playing with how many rows I wanted to do of a certain color before changing colors, and then I just was kind of following this pattern as I went for the start of my sweater. Totally optional though. So getting into how to change colors, when we get to our last stitch, when we have 3 loops on our hook, we're going to pause before we finish off the stitch. So now we're going to make a slip knot with the new color that we're going to switch to, just like so. And going back to our piece, we are going to finish off this stitch by pulling the new color through. So we'll put the slip knot on our hook and pull it through the 3 loops that should be on our hook. And pulling those 2 spare yarns tight, we're going to be working with the long new color yarn. We're going to chain 1 first and flip our work. And pulling these spare yarns up to the top, we're going to try to crochet over them while we go so that you don't have to sew in so many yarns. But we're going to half double crochet across yet again, but this time crochet over the yarn tails, just like this. And you can kind of pull them tight and hold them down. But we're simply doing our half double crochets just as we normally would, but holding them on top of the work right here. So once you half double crochet for several stitches and you've really secured the yarn tails in here, we are simply just going to trim off the excess yarn. And now we can continue doing our half double crochets as we were for as many rows as we want with this color. And I'll give you one more demonstration of how to change colors for my next color change. And as you can see, we have a pretty seamless color change here. So here we are once again at the end of a row, and I know I want to change colors, so before I finish off that stitch, I'm going to make a slip knot with my new color. And placing that slip knot on our hook to pull through the 3 that are on it already. We will do that, pull those extra yarns kind of tight, and we're going to chain 1. Now flipping our work once again, and we're going to again hold these yarns up to the top of our previous round, and starting in that very first stitch, which does get kind of hard to see with these extra yarns, but we're going to go into that first one and just half double crochet over top of the spare yarns. Which, like I said, alternatively, you could use a yarn needle and just sew in these ends if you prefer, but I figure it's much easier to just deal with the little bit of awkward crocheting for a few seconds rather than having to go back and sew in a million yarn tails at the end of your project. So once again, once you've crocheted several stitches, you can go ahead and trim off the excess yarn. So as you can see here, I'm just following my little sample piece that I did, but feel free to do any kind of pattern with your stripes as you like. So you're going to continue adding rows to this, and we're just doing those rows. You should have the same number of stitches that you started with for now, and you're going to keep making rows until your piece starts to come right about to your start of your neck. And then after this, we're going to do some different rounds to kind of fit the shape of the neck hole, but you want it to be right about this tall on you. And feel free to make it longer if you like. Mine is going to be a slightly cropped sweater. You can also hold this up to your reference sweater, and once it reaches the start of the collar, if your sweater does have a collar, so once it reaches this point, like you can see with mine, that's when we know we want to stop doing our rounds. And here we are going to mark a couple of spots on our front panel first. So since we want to start making this neckline, we're going to take a couple stitch markers, which alternatively you could use pins or even safety pins, anything you can find. And we are going to find these 2 spots towards the center of our sweater, right about here, as you can see, and we're going to place 2 stitch markers. I ended up placing these stitch markers about 3.5 inches wide from each other, and you can use the measuring tape to make sure you're centered, measuring from the left and the right, but hopefully you can tell what I mean by the visuals here. And just for reference, my front panel, when I stopped right here, was about, looks like about 14.5 inches. But again, feel free to just hold it up to yourself and see how long you want it to be. So getting started with our crochet, we are going to start as we normally would, but we're only going to crochet until we reach the first stitch marker. So here I'm going to do my last stitch and switch colors. And once I've done that, we are simply going to half double crochet across, and we're going to stop 2 stitches early. So once we see where that stitch marker is, we're going to want to stop a couple stitches before that. So I'll show you exactly where that is, but you're just going to half double crochet across, crocheting over those ends if you did change colors. So once we have gotten to just a couple stitches before the stitch marker, as you can see, there's 2 stitches in between where my last stitch was and where the stitch marker is. And we're going to do a half double crochet decrease stitch, which The stitch that I'm doing, just a disclaimer, isn't quite a half double crochet decrease. I don't really know what it is, but it does crochet the two together, which is all that we need to do. So feel free to just do what I'm doing, but I'm gonna call it a half double crochet decrease. So in order to do this stitch, we're gonna yarn over and put our hook through the first stitch, pulling a loop through, and then we're going to stick our hook through and pull a loop through the next stitch. So once we have all 4 stitches on our hook, we're going to yarn over and pull through all 4. So next, we are going to chain 1 and flip our work, and we are going to want to do another decrease on this end. Since we're trying to make the neckline kind of swoop up, we're going to want to do another decrease, but for me, instead of actually doing that decrease, I find that if you chain 1 and just skip a stitch, you'll end up decreasing. So rather than going into the first stitch that we normally do, we're just going to half double crochet into the second one. And now we're going to go back to our half double crochets and simply go to the end. And you can already see that neckline starting to decrease in as we go. And once we get to the last stitch here, we're not going to do any kind of decreases, we're not doing anything special, because if you do see this, how we want the front panel to look, we are going to want to keep this edge straight, and we're only going to want to decrease on the side near the neckline. So we're not going to do anything special on this end, we're only doing decreases towards the middle side. So starting our rows as we normally would, we'll chain 1, start working half double crochets across, and once again we're going to stop just a couple stitches before the last one in the row. So I know that the stitches get a little bit hard to tell towards where it ends, but if you can see here, those are the last 2 stitches, so we'll stop right here. And you can see our 2 little chains right there, or our 2 stitches right there. So we're going to half double crochet decrease. So yarning over, putting our hook through the first, pulling yarn through, putting our hook through the second, yarning over, pull through, and then we'll have 4 loops on our hook, yarn over through all 4. And so once again, to go to the next round, we're going to chain 1, and rather than decreasing, we'll just skip a stitch. So rather than going into the first one, we will skip that and go into the second right here. And then we will just half double crochet across the row as we normally would, and we're going to just repeat this pattern of decreasing on the neckline side, but doing the other side totally normally. So you're going to continue doing this. I ended up doing it for, looks like 10 rounds or 10 rows, and feel free to hold it up to your sweater, your reference sweater, and just continue doing these decrease rows until it is as tall as the shoulders of your sweater. Like before, we stopped right at the neckline. So continue until the shoulders match for the 2 sweaters. So if you don't have a reference sweater, just do about 10 rows like I did, but if you do, feel free to hold it up like this, and then you'll know when to stop. So to secure that end, I would cut a pretty decently long yarn tail so that we can do some sewing later. But you're just going to knot this end off like so by pulling it through our loop. So we're going to essentially repeat this on the other side. We're just going to flip our sweater so that we can start on the other side. but we're gonna need to make a slip knot to start with the color that we like. So placing our hook in the right corner on the opposite side, just like so, then we're going to place our slip knot onto our hook and pull it through. Then we're going to want to chain 1 additionally. And now we'll begin half double crocheting over, but we are going to start in the stitch that we were already in. So you see where we pulled this yarn through? We're going to start in that very same stitch right here with our first half double crochet. So we will continue until we are just a couple stitches away from our other stitch marker. So once we're at this point, we're going to do another half double crochet decrease. And we've got 2 stitches left. So yarn over, go through the first, go through the next, pulling a loop through each, and pulling a loop through all 4. Just as we did on the other side. And similarly, when we chain 1 and flip our work, we are just going to want to skip that first stitch that we would normally go into and go into the second with a normal half double crochet. And then we'll half double crochet to the end as normal. So like I said, we're just going to do the same as we did on the other side, changing colors as you need, and make it the same height as you did for the other shoulder. So at this point, once you finish both shoulders of the front panel, you should have something that looks like this when you hold it up to your reference sweater. And this is what my front panel looks like. So as for the back panel, this is the back of my sweater, and I'm just going to hold up the front panel to kind of show you the difference. So this is the back, and we aren't going to want to have as deep of a neckline for the back panel. So for your back panel, you're going to start off just the same as you did for the front. You're going to chain for as wide as you want the sweater to be. So for mine, that was about 70 chains wide. And then you're going to start working those rows of half double crochets all the way across and changing color as you like. So you are going to, however, make the initial panel where it's just like a block, a straight rectangle, you are going to make that a little bit taller now. So my recommendation would be to simply make it just about as tall as the total height of your front panel, but minus 2 rows. So as you can see here, I made it just as tall, but an actual, simply a rectangle. We're not making the neckline yet. We're only going to do a very, very slight neckline in the last 2 rows. So as you can see here, we're just making it a simple rectangle that is 2 rows shorter than our front panel is in total. Which for mine, that ended up being about 17.5 inches tall. And my front panel was 18 inches tall. So you can also use that for reference, just make it half an inch shorter. So now for that last half an inch, we are going to do a couple rows to match our neckline. So first you're going to lay your front and back panels down together. And we're going to take our stitch markers and mark exactly where we want to stop crocheting. So you're just going to look to the point where the front panel intersects the back, I guess, and you're going to place a stitch right on that edge. Like here, and then on the other side, we will do the same. And you should have something like this. So getting into the crochet for these last 2 rows that we're going to do, we'll start as we normally would with our half double crochets across and we're just going to stop a couple stitches short of the stitch marker, like you did with the front panel. So once we get here, we are going to do one of those half double crochet decreases once again. And you'll do it just like this. So next, we'll chain 1, and once again, to do another decrease in a way, we're going to skip the first stitch and half double crochet into the second one right here. Now we'll simply half double crochet to the end, and that is all that we'll do for the shoulders of the back panel. So you'll repeat this process, just these 2 rows on the other side, and you might have to start with a slip knot in the corner like we did for the front panel, but just finish those half double crochets across, do the other side, and we'll get to the next step. So now that we have our 2 panels finally complete, we're going to want to take the quote-unquote good sides of the panels, if you have a good side and a bad side. I have one where my ends kind of stick out more, so we're going to take the 2 good sides and put them together so that the bad sides are facing to the top and the bottom, but the good sides are on the inside. And now we're going to begin sewing along this top row here, and we're going to sew the 2 areas like on the shoulders. So not the neck, we're going to stop right on my sweater. I've got the pink color, so we're just going to sew these few inches here for now, and you're just going to need your yarn needle, and we'll just start with the corner, taking the rightmost stitch from either side and going back and forth until we get to the end of this little bit here. Now, once you do get to the end, then we're just going to knot this end off so that we can secure it, and we will then weave the rest of this yarn tail in, or at least weave a little bit of it in, and then trim off the excess. So you're going to do both shoulders like this on just the tops of the panels. So right now you should have something looking like a poncho, and you can go ahead and try it on. And we have something looking like this. So next you're going to take a couple stitch markers. You can take those same 2 that you had up at the top before, and while we're wearing it, or if you want to compare it to your reference sweater that you have separately, you can do that, but we're going to figure out where we want the sleeves to end, and you want to make sure you don't do it too high because otherwise it'll be choking you kind of under the arm. So you can kind of move your arm up and down, figure out where you think a good spot would be, and then go ahead and just place a stitch marker there. And then we're going to place the other one just identically on the other side, in ideally the same row on the other side. And then we know where to stop sewing. So next we're gonna indeed sew up these sides. So now that we have our stitch markers here, we're gonna again make sure we have our good sides of the sweater facing each other. So I've got my bad side facing outward, as you can see here. And then we're simply going to take some spare string and go ahead and start sewing from the bottom corner. And once you go ahead and weave in that first stitch, you can actually tie a knot to make sure that end is secure. But similarly with the shoulders, how you did those, you're just gonna sew up until you reach that stitch marker. And when you do, that's exactly where you're gonna stop. So then you'll just do that for both sides, and you should have something looking like a vest by the end of this. Alrighty, so finally moving on to our sleeves, we are going to go ahead and make a slip knot with whatever color you're going to want to start with, which obviously for the entirety of these sleeves, feel free to change colors as you please, continue with your stripe pattern. So we're going to simply pick a stitch. I'll just pick one kind of at the bottom of this hole here to put my crochet hook in. And then we're going to take our slip knot that we just made and go ahead and put that right on our hook and pull it through that stitch we were just in. Next we'll chain one and begin working our half double crochets once again around this hole. So we're just working into, I guess, the ends of our rows that we previously made. So there isn't going to be those nicely defined stitches like before, but after this first round there will be, I promise. So kind of space them out as you think they should be. And you're just going to keep doing those half double crochets around. So go ahead and continue following this circle until you get back to where we started, and I'll meet you back there. So as you can see, we're coming up to the end of this first round of one of our sleeves here. And I'm just going to go ahead and put a couple more stitches right in at the end here to make sure there's not like a big hole. So I'll place maybe one more right here. And next we're going to take this top of the first stitch that we had made in the entire round right here, and we are actually going to slip stitch. So right here, and pull this one loop all the way through. So next, to start our second round of the sleeve, we'll chain one, start with our half double crochets right there, and keep working all the way around. So this is pretty simple. We've kind of been doing this pattern just back and forth. So now we're just doing it in rounds. However, there's going to be one more catch. So if you want your sleeves to kind of slim down as they go towards your wrist, I guess, you're gonna have to do some decreasing rounds along the way. And I did want this shape, so I figured out kind of the best way to make a gentle slope for the sleeve. And basically that way is that you're gonna do your normal rounds of half double crochets for 7 rounds. So the first 7 will just be completely normal as I just showed you in this first and second. However, on the 8th one, we're going to do what we'll call a decreasing round, and I'll show you exactly how to do that. But for the first 7 rounds, just do normal half double crochets around. And feel free to change colors as you please for your stripes. But go ahead and do those 7 rounds, and I will meet you back at round 8. Alright, you're probably not gonna like this, but we're gonna have to do a little bit of quick maths here. So go ahead and count how many stitches you have for your sleeves right now. You'll probably have something a little bit different than mine, but that's okay. This is why we're gonna do a tiny bit of math. So for me, I had 84 stitches around. If you have more or less, that's totally okay. My number is 84. Take whatever number of stitches you have and divide it by 6. So mine, 84 divided by 6 is 14, which is conveniently even, but if you had like 14.333 or something, just round that down to 14. So remember this number, and then we're gonna subtract 2. So mine will be 14 minus 2 is 12. Keeping that number in mind, we can go ahead and start doing our decrease round. But getting started with our 8th round, we're going to do a half double crochet decrease. And this is going to be our decrease stitch. So now, pulling that number that you had in your brain, we're going to do that many half double crochets. So since my number was 12, we're going to do 12 half double crochets. Once you've done those 12, you're going to do another decrease, another half double crochet decrease, and then that exact number you're going to do again of half double crochets. So I'm going to do another 12 half double crochets. So you're just going to repeat this around. For example, I'll be doing my decrease stitch and then 12 half double crochets. You can do your decrease stitch and however many you calculated to do. If it's 12, perfect. If you had a uneven number when you did that division earlier, if you had like a decimal, you might have a couple stitches at the end. So for example, if you did your last decrease and then you did 12 stitches, you might have a couple more to do. That's going to be okay. Just finish off the round with half double crochets. And the nice thing is, after this round 8, we're going to do another 7 rounds of half double crochet rows. So just back to normal. You don't have to worry about counting anymore. Well, you have to count the rows themselves, but that's about it. So once we get to the next 8th round, or I guess the 16th round, we're going to do another decrease row, and I'll show you what to do there. So now that we've got to our 16th round, or our next 8th round, same thing. We are going to start off with a half double crochet decrease stitch. So crocheting the first two together with this decrease. We're going to go ahead and do that first. And if you remember from round 8, if not, you can go count the number of stitches that you did after the decrease. For example, mine was 12 stitches. We are going to do one less than that for this round. So I'll do a decrease and then I'll do 11 half double crochets, decrease, 11 half double crochets, and so on. And then just finish off with half double crochets if you have anything left over. So this might be a little bit confusing, but just look back to your 8th round if you can't remember how many half double crochets you ended up doing, and do one less than that. So for me, that's 11. And again, once we've done those 11, we'll switch to our decrease stitch, half double crochet decrease, and then 11 more half double crochets. And after this round, you're going to go ahead back to your normal rounds and do 7 rounds of half double crochet stitches. And you might start to see the pattern emerging here, but we'll go ahead and meet you back one last time for the 24th round, and I'll show you how to do that decrease round, and then I think you'll be pretty set. So now that we are on our decrease round, round 24, we are going to start off with a chain and a half double crochet decrease over the first 2, just as you did before. And then for the number of half double crochets we're going to do this time, whatever number you did 8 rounds ago, you're going to do one less than that. So my first decrease round, I did half double crochet decrease, 12 half double crochets. The next one I did the decrease and then 11 half double crochets. This one we're going to do the decrease and then 10 half double crochets. So go ahead and do those 10, and then we'll do another decrease, do another 10 half double crochets, and if you have a couple stitches left over, go ahead and just half double crochet in those when you get to the end there of that round. So kind of in summary, with your sleeves pattern, you'll do 7 rounds of normal half double crochet, and then you'll do your decrease round, and you're just going to repeat that pattern of 8 all the way for the length of your sleeve. And in terms of length of your sleeve, you're going to want to stop just maybe an inch or 2 before the final length that you want it, because we're going to go ahead and crochet like a little trim to go around the edge. So you can hold that up to your reference sweater, you can go ahead and try it on and just continue your pattern until you have it as long as you like. But again, every 8th round you're going to do one less half double crochet in the pattern. So decrease 12 half double crochets, decrease 11 half double crochets, 10, 9, 8. I think I got down to like 6 by the time I got to the end of the sleeve. But continue changing colors for the stripes as you like. And I hope you kind of have a good idea of how to do the sleeve now. So just go ahead and finish this one up. Do the other one just the same. And we are getting pretty close to the end of our sweater. We've, after this, just got some trim to do, but that's pretty quick and easy. So go finish up those sleeves. Alright, so moving on to the trim for the sleeves, You're going to make a slip knot with your desired color. Then we're going to go ahead and place that on our hook, and for this one we are going to chain 9. If you don't want your trim to be quite as wide as mine, or if you want it to be wider, you can increase or decrease this amount as you please, but we're going to chain 9. And looking to the second stitch from our hook, we are going to half double crochet into it. So just skipping one, doing our first half double crochet into that stitch. And then we're going to half double crochet to the end of the row. And you should have 8 stitches wide for basically the entirety of your trim for your sleeves. But just half double crochet across. So now we should have something looking like this. We're going to chain 1 and turn our work. So for this next round, and for actually all of the rounds to come for the trim, we're going to half double crochet in the back loops only. So if you see this stitch, you can see that back half is kind of the top one right here, and we're going to just crochet into the back loop. Just like this, and do a half double crochet, working all the way across, and just making sure to maintain those 8 stitches wide, which I would probably recommend counting for the first few rows to make sure you do in fact have 8. And then once you get to the end of that round, you'll just chain 1 and turn your work and keep going. In terms of how long you should make this, you can simply fold it in half like so and just line it up next to the end of your sleeve. So for me, I had to make the trim for the sleeves 28 rows tall. And then you should have something that looks like this, so yours might not necessarily be 28 rows, but you can go ahead and do that. You just want it to be, when it's folded in half, about the same width as your sleeve. So to go ahead and connect your trim make it into a circle, we're gonna fold the bottom half up to the top half like so, and make sure you have your loop with your yarn on the right side. So then we're going to go ahead and stick our hook through the first stitch on kind of this bottom row, I guess. And then we're going to grab our working yarn and actually pull it through. Kind of like a slip stitch, I guess. And now, just holding these 2 pieces together as we go, we're going to work stitch by stitch, placing our hook between both pieces, so the front and the back portion, and just do a slip stitch to connect them. And so you'll end up doing around 8 of these, 1 for each stitch. And then if you prefer, you can just sew this up with a yarn needle. But I prefer to just crochet instead. So once you have finished that, you're gonna go ahead and flip your sweater inside out. So we want, like, quote unquote, the bad side out for the sleeve. So then, kind of flattening it out, we're gonna take our trim, now it being a circle, and we're going to place it inside of the sleeve. And then similarly, I'm gonna show you how to crochet the two pieces together rather than sewing them. However, you can sew them if you prefer. Sticking your hook through one of the loops on the sleeve itself, we're gonna go ahead and pull our working yarn through the stitch with a slip stitch yet again. And then we are going to simply slip stitch the two pieces together. So when we insert our hook, we do it into the front with the actual sleeve, and then we're also going to make sure it goes through the trim piece so that we can connect them. And it's a pretty seamless looking way to stitch them up without having to do any sewing. It's still crocheting. And you'll just go all the way around, kind of shimmying as you go, making sure that both pieces are kind of even with each other. One tactic I used to keep the two pieces aligned was with, like, the bottom piece. I ended up using stitch markers to hold the two together in certain areas. Feel free to try that out. But just continuing to do our slip stitches around, and I'll meet you back once we get all the way around. So as you can see, we came back all the way around, and at this point we are going to trim our yarn and just pull a loop through to secure it off. Now, taking our yarn needle, we will need to sew in these couple ends that we should have. We'll just go ahead and put the yarn on our needle, and I'm going to weave it into the trim part so that it's a little bit easier to hide since it's the same color. So you'll just do something like this, pull it through. Maybe I'll weave it in a few more stitches. And honestly, that should be good enough. So we'll take the other one, do the same, and trim our ends. So you'll just want to do this same exact process for the other sleeve. So I'm going to go ahead and do a trim the exact same way, but for the bottom of my sweater. So this one is a little bit longer, but it goes pretty fast, as I'm sure you saw with the sleeves trim. But we're going to make it the same width. So it's essentially the same process as you used for the sleeves. You'll chain 9 to start, but you're going to half double crochet 8 across, and then just doing your rows, working in the back loops only. And you're going to want to make it as long as your sweater is wide, I guess, but make sure you're folding that trim in half like so, and then you can just hold it up to the end of your sweater, and once it matches the length, then you know you're good. Which, for reference, I think I did about 70 rounds or 70 rows of the back loop only half double crochets for the trim. But once you do that, you'll go ahead and join it into a circle the same way I showed you, just slip stitching those two ends together, And then in order to connect it to your sweater, again, you'll just place this trim inside of your sweater, making sure you have it flipped inside out, by the way. So you have the quote-unquote bad side of the sweater facing out, and you'll place your trim inside and just slip stitch across the top. Then when you flip your sweater inside out, fold the trim down, it should have that nice seam. So do the exact same thing you did for the sleeves, just kind of on a larger scale, if that makes sense. So the very last piece we're going to crochet and attach, like the last detail I guess, is the trim for the collar, which, spoiler alert, is very similar to the trim that we just did for the sleeves and the bottom. However, we're going to make it a little bit less wide, just because I think it looks better that way. So for my trim, we're going to start with a slip knot. Placing it on our hook, we're going to chain 6. So once you've got those 6, we are going to look to the second stitch from our hook, or the second chain, and half double crochet. So since we did 6 chains initially, we should have 5 stitches across after this row. So just half double crocheting across, you should have 5. And once you get to the end, you're just gonna chain 1. And now we're gonna flip our work and half double crochet into the back loops only. So again, just making sure you have 5 stitches across as you go. And you're gonna continue making rows with back loop only. And that's how you get that ribbed effect. So this will just be the same as before, but a little bit less wide. So for my collar trim, I did about 65 rows. And so how do you know when you're done? This one isn't quite as easy to compare. You can't just hold it up, like fold it in half quite. So this is kind of how I measured it by my eye. So I place my sweater down and I am kind of placing the trim around the neckline, just following that line. And once my trim matches up to the other side and we can kind of complete this circle, then we know we have done enough. So in order to connect this, you're going to use, again, a very similar method. You're just going to stitch this up with slip stitches to make it into a circle, exactly as before. And then sewing this one in, or crocheting this one is a little bit more awkward than the other two. However, if you want, use pins to hold it in place, use stitch markers to hold it in place. But you'll hold it kind of like this and just work around it with those slip stitches. But once again, make sure you flip your sweater inside out when you do this, so that when you fold this trim up, it has a nice seam. And at last, we have finally finished our sweater. I am genuinely so excited with how this turned out. This might be my favorite thing I've ever made, honestly. I'm gonna fight the urge to wear this every single day, but I hope you enjoyed this tutorial and making this super cute sweater with me. If you have any questions, leave them in the comments below, but make sure to like and subscribe. Thank you so much for watching. Can't wait to see you for my next crochet project. Bye!